Welcome back, y'all, and happy Monday. This is the Bluechip Breakdown, and I'm your host, Bull. We have about 12 days until kickoff between Tennessee and Ohio State. So we have plenty of time to go through all the individual matchups and things like that. This week, we'll be focusing a lot more on position matchups, and next week is going to be more scheme-based. So please do stay tuned for that. And there's no better place for us to start this thing off than the trenches, because that is where football games are won and lost at. Really, the whole identity of your team comes from what you have up front. And it could fall into two categories, just as far as I'm concerned. It's going to be physical or it's going to be finesse. We'll talk about what Tennessee is and what Ohio State is on both fronts. Of course, we will be putting everything up side by side so that y'all can see the difference in an SEC front versus a Big Ten front. And honestly speaking, y'all, talking about, front four, front seven, whatever, this is what separates the SEC from everybody else. And y'all will see that as we go through all these things. We're going to be talking about how productive are each front with Pro Football Focus. We'll also be looking at how athletic is each front and things like that. So of course, we always have the all 22 highlight clips for y'all. So please do us a very big favor before we get started. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, so we'll be starting off with Pro Football Focus. These are their grades and their stats, and this is both offensive lines. I wanted to use this as a point of reference for both fan bases, and this is organized by the amount of snaps that each player has gotten. So it's going to be in descending order. And if you look right here, you will see all of the Pro Football Focus grades. I tend not to pay too much attention to that. I take it with a grain of salt because I don't know who it is that's grading this and what their scale is. I don't know any of that type of stuff, so I don't trust it too much. Over here, you will see the amount of snaps they've gotten at different positions. And with all that being said, what I'm going to do for everyone is just kind of scroll all the way down to the bottom, pause this at your own leisure so that you can just compare and contrast both of these offensive lines. Now, I'm going to scroll this thing over and I'll show you what I like to pay attention to the most whenever we're talking about offensive line. So it's going to be right here. I like to look at the sacks, the hits, the pressure rate, things like that. For me, that's a better indication of who's playing the best. And these numbers aren't going to be 100% accurate. I'll tell you right here, right now, that Ohio State has given up 13 sacks on the season. Tennessee has given up 26. But if you look at Pro Football Focus, they're only crediting the Buckeyes with 9 sacks given up and Tennessee with 13. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, there really isn't that much of a difference. And what I just did, y'all, is I reorganized this whole thing based off of the sacks so that we can take a look at that. I'm going to go back over here and reorganize this based off of the snap count. And I'm going to show everyone who the projected starters I think will be for Ohio State. So right here, these are all the guys that started versus Michigan. Now, there has been a whole lot of talk because they do have some injuries up front that maybe some of the players that came in for the injured guys aren't playing as well. And they might try to go to some of these underclassmen in different spots. That's something that we might talk about more over the course of this week as we get some more information. But let's bring this thing right on back over to what I like to look at, boom, right here. So let's reorganize this based off of the pressure rates that have been given up. And some of these players obviously are going to be underclassmen that don't really get to play too much. So we'll scroll this thing up and we'll see the guys that actually get to play. Okay, actually, I'll just scroll through this entire thing so that y'all can see how this looks, what the difference is between Tennessee's offensive line and Ohio State. You can see that they do a pretty good job as far as pass protection goes. And I think that really their offensive line is more about pass pro. It's not as much about run blocking and actually moving bodies. Now let's take a closer look at my projected starters for Ohio State's offensive line. We just kind of highlighted this, but we're going to be starting it off at the top with number 74, Donovan Jackson, listed at 6'4", 320 pounds. He is a senior. He made the move from left guard to left tackle because Josh Simmons, their starting left tackle, is out. I don't think he's going to be back for this game. I think he's probably out for the season, I think with some sort of a knee deal. Either way, I think that Donovan does a really nice job, okay, especially in pass pro. He looks solid there to me from everything that I've seen on film, and I've watched several games. Like we talked about, their entire offensive line looks good in pass protection. He's given up 2 sacks and 17 pressures this year. Some of that's going to, maybe be from left tackle. Some's going to be from left guard. And I would say he might be one of the more consistent body movers as far as run blocking goes. He actually does tend to get some movement, not as much versus better fronts like Michigan, but from, some of the other teams that they played up against, I've seen him do a nice job of moving people. But I think that he has a really nice skill set. Again, he is playing out of position. We'll see what he does with all the speed that Tennessee can bring off of the edge, because that's something that he struggles with, along with their other tackle that we will be talking about here in just a second. The speed and the power rush tends to get both of their tackles, but I think Donovan Jackson is probably the most consistent with everything that we're going to be talking about amongst their tackles that I have projected as starters. Next player is left guard, number 67, Austin Searfield. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but listed at 6'5", 320 pounds. He is a sophomore, so he's playing at left guard right now. He can also play right guard, so he's strictly a guard body. He's given up 3 sacks and 5 pressures on the season. Again, very solid with his pass pro. I wonder how he's going to deal with some of the twitchiness, some of the stunts that Tennessee likes to do up front. I've seen him struggle just a little bit with that, but he definitely is not moving bodies up front, not versus real competition. So I think that that is going to be a problem for Ohio State if they want to try to establish any running game, because our tackles up front are deep, they're big, they're fast, they're twitchy, they're very, very physical. I think that their guards and their center might struggle some versus the interior of Tennessee's defensive line. Next player at center, we have number 75, Carson Hinsman, listed at 6'5", 300 pounds. He is a junior. He's played center. He's also played right guard. He's given up 1 sack and 8 pressures on the season. He is one that's very inconsistent. I've seen him kind of stumble and, fall over his own feet, or, just be off balance, things like that. I think that from a pass rushing perspective, Tennessee wants to go at their center if he does indeed start for this game. He also isn't really moving bodies. He's a good athlete and things like that, just as far as offensive linemen go. But I think that they will, like we just talked about, I think that he will be one of the players on the interior of their offensive line that is going to struggle versus a very good defensive tackle group with Tennessee. Next at right guard, we have number 77, Tegra. I don't even want to try to pronounce his last name, but he's listed at 6'6", 327 pounds. He is a junior, mostly plays at right guard. He's given up 0 sacks and 10 pressures on the season. I thought that he looked really good, especially in pass protection, but also just as far as run blocking. To me, he might be their most consistent offensive lineman. And it's pretty funny listening to some of the Buckeye fans and podcasts and things. They don't like him that much because they're saying he's not picking up the correct people all the time, which I have noticed he can get a little bit confused with the blitzes coming up the middle. It's something that Tennessee does not do a lot of. I think that in this game, Tennessee might try to blitz more up the middle, bring more stunts and things like that, just to throw off what the offensive line is doing. But if he gets his hands on you, man, this is a big dude. This is a strong dude. I think that he moves pretty well. He is going to be able to neutralize you once he gets his hands on you. At least that's what I've seen from him on film. Like we keep on touching on, it is a different beast going up against this defensive front because it is very deep and we're going to come in waves. So last player that we're going to be talking about is number 70 at right tackle, Josh Fryer. I don't know if I'm saying his name right either. Listed at 6'5", 320 pounds. He's another senior. He's given up 1 sack and 11 pressures on the season. I think that he's really good with his pass pro, but as we did touch on earlier, the speed to the outside and especially the power with him, it tends to throw him off balance. I think that he's going to have a problem going up against our strong side DNs and versus our Leos, whoever he ends up getting matched up with, because that's pretty much all they do. And I could actually echo the same sentiment for their entire offensive line. If you have some sort of a secondary move, if there's any twitch to you, they tend to struggle moving. And he might be, their least mobile offensive lineman. He is very, very slow-footed. So I can see Tennessee getting pressure off of his side, and he's not moving anybody in run blocking. He does a good job of walling people off, okay? He does a great job with that finesse, which you can win with an offensive line that plays more finesse, but I think it's tough to do it versus a defensive line like Tennessee's that likes to get penetration. And I did see Michigan shooting gaps pretty quickly off of the snap of the football versus offensive line and them struggling to be able to block those players. So I think that there's several places that Tennessee might have the edge on the Buckeyes offensive line. All right, y'all, now let's flip the page and talk about the front fours for each defense. This will be in descending order on Pro Football Focus based off of the amount of pass rushing snaps each player has got. The first thing that I'll tell y'all that's the difference between these two fronts is that Ohio State has 6 players over 290 pounds. Tennessee has 12, and Tennessee is the twitchier unit. We're going to take a look at some of the speed stats and all that here in just a minute, but that is a major difference between the typical Big Ten team versus the typical SEC team. Not just do we have more big players, but they're also twitchier, and Tennessee does rotate more players than Ohio State does. I'll just kind of scroll this down for y'all real quick. Ohio State really only goes about 2 deep from end to end. Tennessee can go 3 to 4, I mean, sometimes even 5 deep if we absolutely have to, or if we just want to. So we are going to rotate very, very frequently and in waves. And I think that this is going to wear on both of Ohio State's fronts over the course of a 60-minute game, especially with their defense. If you consider that Tennessee's going to run some tempo in this game, they're going to get gassed. Okay, their defensive tackles barely ever rotate out of the game. I think that's going to be a problem for them in the second half of this game. But let me show y'all what I like to pay attention to with the defensive line stats. It's right here from sack to pressure rates. To me, this is the best indication of how effective your players are at getting to the quarterback. So we're going to reorganize this based off of the sacks. You can see that up top, Ohio State has a player that's listed with 9 sacks. But if you go to a place like ESPN, they only have him with like 6.5 sacks. Now for Tennessee, we can see that James Pierce is showing up with 8 sacks. But if you go to ESPN, he's showing up with 7.5. So we can also pay attention to the difference in the snap total. Okay, so like, let me bring this back over. Boom. So you can see that actually JT has 4 more sacks than James Pierce does. I wanted to point that out, but now let me also reorganize this based off of the pressure rate percentage. What you're going to see for Tennessee are 2 different players, right? We've got one guy that's an edge, James Pierce. Then we have Omar Norman-Lott, who is a defensive tackle, getting more pressure than Ohio State's best pass rusher right here, Jack Sawyer. And of course, we've got 2 linebackers right here that we will not be looking at for this video. We'll look at them a little bit later on, but let me just kind of scroll this thing down for everyone so that y'all can see the differences right there. Now let's take a look at the difference in speed with all the players up front for both teams. And what you're going to see up at the top is Tennessee does have the fastest front 4 player on defense at 19.7 miles per hour. And he is going to be a guy that's up over 290 pounds. So the next fastest player is going to be one of Ohio State's backup at end, Caden Curry, at 19.2 miles per hour. Then you've got a whole lot of Tennessee players. Now, what's interesting right here is that Bryson Eason, who is a defensive tackle, he's like 320 pounds. He is faster, even though it's, just barely faster, but he is faster than their best pass rusher. So again, we're talking about the difference in athleticism up front for both teams. Then we have Big O, who's like 330 or something like that. He's faster than their second best pass rusher. So that right there, I think that this really tells a whole lot about the difference in speed and athleticism on both fronts. But let's go ahead and talk about the starting 4 for Ohio State. So starting off at the top with defensive end number 44, JT, I cannot pronounce his last name, listed at 6'5", about 270 pounds. He is a senior and he has 6 sacks on the season. He's what Tennessee fans know as a strong side defensive end. He's very good in run support, does a good job of setting those edges, using his strength, using his power. He's got a little bit of twitch to him, but it's not like SEC twitch. This is not a guy that I'm concerned with our tackles who have kind of struggled versus true speed on the outside. I don't think that they're going to have a problem blocking him because he is going to try to come with a lot more power, and our tackles do a good job versus power rushers. So that's a good thing for Tennessee, but he does play with a very, very high motor, and a lot of his sacks just come from him not giving up on plays and things like that. But I'm not too concerned about him getting to our quarterback. I'm more concerned with us being able to run the football right at him in certain situations where we might have to. Next player is defensive tackle, number 91, Tyleik Williams, listed at 6'3", 327 pounds. He's a senior. He has 2.5 sacks on the season. I think that Tyleik Williams looks a lot like an SEC defensive tackle. He's big, okay, and he's twitchy. I think that he has a really good job of not getting moved too much off of his spot. But as we talked about, over the course of a 60-minute game where Tennessee's probably going to be running a lot of tempo, how gassed is he going to be in that second half? At that point, Tennessee should be able to maintain that running game because I don't think he's going to be getting too many breaks in this game, and that is going to be a problem in the second half for Ohio State's defensive front. Next player is going to be defensive tackle number 58, Ty Hamilton, listed at 6'3", 295 pounds. He's another senior. He has 2.5 sacks on the season. And he is another one that I think looks a lot like a SEC defensive tackle. He has good size, he has good twitch, and he plays with a very, very high motor. Again, like what he's talked about with Tyleik, we have got to make sure that we keep on pounding and pounding and pounding over the course of this game to get these guys gassed because they are just not going to rotate in that many players. Once that tank runs out for these guys, that's it, and I think that that's going to be Tennessee's game plan. Last player on Ohio State's front is going to be defensive end number 33, Jack Sawyer, listed at 6'5", 260 pounds, another senior with 4.5 sacks on the season. Now, he is very similar to like what he's talked about, a strong side defensive end for Tennessee. He is not the twitchiest player, but he's strong at the point of contact, does a really good job in run support, and he's going to play with a high motor. He's not going to give up on plays. I think that all the guys up front for the Buckeyes understand what to do, okay? Like they're going to be pretty fundamentally sound. And we will also see some NASCAR or Rabbits packages where Jack could line up as a defensive tackle, and could that pose some problems to our guys on the interior of the offensive line? I think possibly, because he would be a quicker defensive tackle body, but he's going to be very, very undersized. So it's going to be all about knowing who to pick up on those stunts and things like that. Again, we're not going to get too far into the scheme today, but I did want to point that out as something that maybe Ohio State could try to do if they get into some third and long situations. All right, y'all, now it's time for us to recap. Let's talk a little bit more about Tennessee's offensive line. It's more about physicality, okay? Like we're going to do a whole lot of gap scheme, pulling, just want to bully you, like want to push you around. It's going to be very similar to what Ohio State saw versus Michigan, but I think that Tennessee's offensive line is better than Michigan's offensive line, and we are deep there. I didn't talk about that too much, but we can go, I would say, too deep at pretty much every single position. Center is going to be kind of a iffy thing just because we'd have to pull one of the backup tackles over there to play at center. But Tennessee's offensive line, knock on wood, man, at this point, they are still very, very healthy. So I think that the edge right there will go to Tennessee. Also, we don't really struggle versus this sort of a defensive line where they want to try to, rush with power and things like that. Now, they might do a pretty solid job to start the game off of not getting moved as much, but as the game wears on and as they get tired, Tennessee will be able to run the football, okay? And that's what Tennessee is going to do. Tennessee is a physical team from top to bottom. So I think that this matchup, again, it really does favor Tennessee if you're talking about the offensive line versus Ohio State's defensive line. Now, if you flip it on over and talk about Ohio State's offensive line versus Tennessee's defensive line, we talked about it, man. They've got 2-3 guys that might play, or, one of those guys might end up going, but, the other two are not going to go. So that's going to be a problem, I think, for Ohio State's offensive line, because if you look at what they struggled with versus Michigan that their fans keep on talking about, was trying to be physical. If they couldn't move Michigan's front, they're not going to move Tennessee's front, because Michigan does have a very good front four. I think they actually might have one more player over 290 pounds than Tennessee does. I think that they have 13. Tennessee has 12. But Tennessee's defensive line is a lot more athletic and big than Michigan's is. So that could maybe pose some problems to them. We haven't got to the linebackers yet, but obviously that's a big part of the front seven and of the run game. If the linebackers can just get to their fits, I think that Tennessee's front will do a good job of minimizing the movement up front for Ohio State's running game. But as far as pass pro goes, I do think that Ohio State might have a little bit of an edge there. We'll see. Again, it's a 60-minute game. They're going to have to be able to sustain that. Tennessee runs a whole lot of stunts and things like that. I just need to see Tennessee come out and really get after that passer like I know that we're capable of. Now, I do think that as far as, athleticism is concerned, Ohio State has not seen an offense or a defensive line that's nearly as athletic as Tennessee's is. So on the edge, especially, having a guy that is typically playing at guard, playing at tackle, that could hurt him. Number 70 playing at right tackle, that speed and athleticism could hurt him as well. And Tennessee is going to bring it in waves. We are going to have a pretty much full tank, by the end of that fourth quarter, because we rotate in so many players. So I think that if you look up front in the trenches where the games are won and lost at, you absolutely have got to give the edge to Tennessee. And that's not me being a homer. That's not me being biased. Y'all looked at everything for yourselves. So y'all tell me what y'all think down in the comment section. But that's it for this one. We'll have some more videos coming out for y'all, obviously, over the course of this week. But please do make sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your friends, family, and other volunteer fans. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.